Hey, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. My name is Salvador Brigman, and on this show, we really get to the crux of how to be successful with a crowdfunding campaign. We interview successful entrepreneurs who have been there and done that, and they tell you what happens behind the scenes when it comes to their Kickstarter and Indiegogo projects. And I've been lucky enough to interview over 500 incredible creators, inventors, Renaissance people, entrepreneurs on this podcast since 2015 when I actually launched this show. And I'm so excited for today because we're actually getting into and diving in deep when it comes to the Kickstarter Creative Download Report for 2024. What does that mean? All that means, my friend, is that we're going through some of the statistics, some of the findings, and some of the categories and types of projects that are doing well right now on the Kickstarter crowdfunding platform. And you get me today. Instead of having a guest, we're actually doing a one-on-one here. So whether you're going out there and you're commuting to work, you're cleaning your room, you're going to the gym, and you're listening at the same time, tune in today's episode because we're going into this. Plus, I'm talking about how this more specifically applies to you. If you're gearing up to the launch of a crowdfunding campaign, you're thinking about doing a campaign, or you're even in the middle of one right now, how does this information that we're sharing, which is great theory and great stats, and I obviously love that, how does that really practically apply to your launch? And how can you use this to have a powerful campaign and to use this as an advantage when it comes to going live? So we're talking about that and more on today's podcast episode. And in addition, if you love, cutting edge information, new news, resources and tools, and you want that delivered straight to your inbox on a weekly basis, I have a great newsletter out there that not a lot of people know about, but actually has, tens of thousands of subscribers, which is incredible. And I'm so lucky to be able to, speak with some of these subscribers. If you want to learn more about this newsletter that I have, which is called Killer Crowdfunding Tips, you can go and check out the link at crowdcrux.com/newsletter. You go there, enter your name and email. You can join my free weekly Killer Crowdfunding Tips newsletter, where I kind of send out these tidbits or nuggets of gold when it comes to crowdfunding. It could be a unique hack or method. It could be a new tool that I've discovered that week. It could be some news. You're going to get that straight into your inbox at crowdcrux.com/newsletter. Go there, enter your name and email, and you'll start getting some more great high quality educational information delivered straight to your inbox. Without further ado, let's jump into today's podcast episode and discover more about some of the Kickstarter stats and information coming from last year. All right, so let's get straight into this. This is the Kickstarter Creative Download Report in 2024, and you could go through this on your own time, but honestly, there's a lot of information that really just doesn't apply to you. So I want to kind of cut through the fluff and just get to a couple high-level points to start with, and then we're going to kind of narrate and get into how this applies to you, and more specifically, we're going to end with some critical takeaways and things that you can do, action items, after today's podcast. If that sounds exciting to you, leave a positive rating and review on iTunes if you do enjoy the show, and give me a positive comment on YouTube if you're listening on my YouTube channel. So let's first get into the funding activity. Now, believe me, this is astounding, but more than 35,000 projects, specifically 35,512 projects were launched on Kickstarter in 2024. And according to them, this is more than any other creative crowdfunding platform. So we've seen record numbers of campaigns that are being launched. Over 706 million was pledged successfully to funding projects. Now, they use that word successfully because there's campaigns as well that are not successful and people pledge to those campaigns. So the number of amount of funding or the amount that's been pledged is actually higher than 700 million, but 700 million, a little bit over that, was pledged successfully to projects. The average contribution or pledge, if you want to put it that way, was $116. And this is actually a 5% increase from 2023. One backer, and this dude is like a rock star, man. We should give him like a medal, right? Or a plaque. This one guy actually backed more than 138,000 across 111 projects. So one dude out there did a six-figure backing for the year. Incredible. That man, like I said, deserves a medal. And I think that's also a great testament to the fact that people are excited about crowdfunding. This is, back in the day, we were worried about COVID and slowdown, but actually we're seeing an acceleration that's happening when it comes to Kickstarter and new projects that are being launched. And more importantly, if we want to kind of dial in just a tiny bit more, if we look at the specific categories that are being successful when it comes to crowdfunding, theater campaigns, my gosh, we've seen a massive jump from the year previously, over 61% growth in just the theater project category, and more than 77% in terms of a rise in backers. On journalism, we saw a funding growth of over 25%, along a 37% increase in backers. Publishing also grew 16%, with funds more than 22% when it comes to that. And I think that's really exciting that we're seeing sort of these breakout kind of creative categories. So if you're on the fence at all and you're thinking about doing like a theater project or a film project or a journalism project or a project that's more creative in nature, this is a great time to really be able to sink your teeth into crowdfunding to begin to make use of the tribe that's available on Kickstarter. I think this is a great option. But I think that more importantly, and if I really want to cut through the fluff, what my students are really interested in, it's like which categories and types of products are doing well. And believe it or not, the 2024 Creative Download Report did share that information, which I think is historic because a lot of the times Kickstarter is very closed off about that information. So if we want to look at the actual specific types of products, the biggest product types that saw the most and the best funding were number one, watches, tarot card decks, dice, keyboards, and coffee-related products. And I think that actually is really in line with, you want to go back in the archives of this podcast, the last 100 or 200 episodes have all been lots of tarot cards, dice, keyboards, right? Tons of cool coffee, interesting products like that, watches as well. So we've kind of seen a mini slice of the pie on the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast of the top categories out there on Kickstarter. But I do think that says a lot that if you're thinking of launching a project and maybe you're an artist, for example, as one takeaway, or you're thinking of working with an artist, why not choose a form factor for your art that's going to appeal to the masses? So rather than, for example, just doing a really nice picture book or doing something really nice in terms of just like a paint or a drawing, why not put that art onto some tarot cards and sell it that way, right? Or thinking about dice, how can we reinvent the materials or the dice that's used when it comes to board games? Coffee, what are some of the things that we haven't thought about? Ways to really have new ingenuity or to rethink the design of different coffee makers. Keyboards as well, of course, and watches, the design, the finishing. This is a great time to be an entrepreneur, a creator, an inventor, someone who has something new that they want to share with the world. And you don't have to necessarily fit into one of those categories either, because like I said, we're seeing breakout success. To get a little bit more specific here, some of the most backed categories on Kickstarter this previous year, number one, games at 3.3 million in funding for the games category. Number two, design at over 800,000, which has been backed in terms of the design category. This project to me is this category to me is so ripe, so fertile if you're thinking about doing a new project. Comics as well, more than 600,000 people in terms of most backed categories. And another great one for first-time Kickstarter creators. I get this question a lot. Hey, Sal, I've never done a campaign before. Can I be successful with this? Am I going to be able to, be happy at the end of the day launching this and spending a couple months of my life getting this project together? And what I say to that is that we've had over 3,900 first-time Kickstarter creators in the games category alone. More than 2,700 in the publishing category. More than 2,200 in the film and video category. My friends, this is the time. This is the renaissance. If you're thinking about, putting out a new project, there's no other indication that other people are being successful with crowdfunding. And as I love to say on the show, why not you? These aren't gods and goddesses. These aren't people who have some kind of magical powers, right? These are ordinary, everyday individuals who are coming out with new campaigns, sometimes their first campaign. So why not you? Why can't you be that next crowdfunding success story? Think bigger, be bold, right, in your intentions. To get even more specific with some of these categories, there were actually $36 million campaigns in the games category, $34 million campaigns in the technology category, and 10 in the design category in terms of $1 million Kickstarter campaigns. So to me, this is a growing marketplace. And one of the things I've learned from helping entrepreneurs raise money and raise capital for the business as well, beyond just crowdfunding, also like investors and getting help with that. And that's a lot what goes more like to equity crowdfunding, those kind of points, is that you always want to be in a growing market. The more you can be in a growing market, the easier it is, because as the market's growing and your business is growing, it almost has like this compounded effect, right? It's great as well to, you already have a stagnant market, to have a reinvention of a product idea. That always works really well. But one of the things I pay attention to as I'm traveling all the time, I love to go to Europe, I love to go to Asia, and just see the way that life is, to see how society is set up, to see the types of products that are, blowing up in South Korea, to see kind of like just in general what the appetite is like around the globe. If you want to look at it, there are some major hubs when it comes to Kickstarter creators and powerhouses when these projects are emerging. And if you want to kind of look at cities on the rise, and this is kind of exciting for me. So one of the cities on the rise when it comes to crowdfunding, when it comes to new campaigns, would be Berlin and Denver have emerged as new creative hotspots. Basically, creators are launching high-profile design, technology, and gaming campaigns from these cities. So we're seeing more projects in Berlin and Denver that have been successful when it comes to crowdfunding. To kind of go along with that, and this is kind of my own intuition and just the students I've had, the clients that I've worked with, we're seeing lots of people who are in Asia and other areas around the world wanting to gain access to the American market and launching projects to be able to get exposure when it comes to their brand with Americans, Canadians, and really those Europeans as well. We have a lot of people in America that are backing Kickstarter campaigns. So that's another, takeaway that wasn't included in this report, but one that I wanted to make sure you are aware of. Another thing that I've noticed, or another takeaway, and also Kickstarter pointed this out in their creative report, is the fact that many sort of digital projects, for example, like a video game, are starting to interact more and more with the physical world. So this could be offering rewards like handcrafted cartridges for like a retro console, or vinyl soundtracks, collector's edition boxes, miniatures, posters, more. They're kind of finding ways to be able to interact with the real world. And I think that's a great example of how you can go from maybe being one type of creator, like an author, the way that Brandon Sanderson was, and to also then to be able to launch another physical extension of your brand. And by that, of course, I mean his Cosmere role-playing game, which he launched, I think it was with Brothers Wise Games, and they actually launched this campaign that raised over $15 million on Kickstarter for more than 55,000 backers. So one of the things I always invite my coaching students to do, not only just think bigger, but also to think dynamically. Once you have a successful project on Kickstarter, you can change verticals. You can launch another project that kind of is in a different brand or vertical on Kickstarter, and you can use that community that you've already built up to be successful with that new project. Now, at this point in time, if you're listening to this show and you're thinking about producing a new product, something that's like an invention or a design or a gadget, it gets me like, I got it, Sal. Like, I understand with these creative people, they're crushing it when it comes to crowdfunding, but what about me? What if I am trying to invent the future? What if I want to have something new that's going to really profoundly impact people's lives? What takeaways can you give for me? And to answer that question, I'd say that from no other year, I've seen a huge influx of new projects that are really going after sort of home technology, and also involving AI technology in that as well. I think that one standout example for the top tech-funded project of 2024 was, and I'm going to totally mispronounce this, Valerion Vision Master. This is a cinema-grade RGB laser projector. And this campaign raised over $10 million from more than 4,800 backers. It shattered records and is the highest funded projector in crowdfunding history. So to me, that's like a cool way of, kind of blending retro home products with also something that's more innovative, interesting, and having more high technology involved in that. We're also seeing more projects around data privacy. I think that kind of goes back even to with Indiegogo as well. We've seen lots of great projects around privacy in the past. I think of Proton Mail as a great example of a crowdfunded campaign that's really focused on data privacy in the past. So we're seeing more and more creators that are not only focusing focused on home automation, AI, also security and sort of that privacy element. We're also seeing more fashion projects as well. So these are fashion projects that are using materials that maybe you don't always think about. It could be cactus leather. It could be materials that are innovative in some way, design trends. We're seeing a lot more leather and jewelry made in interesting ways and kind of published on Kickstarter as a platform to be able to gain access to new backers. So we're seeing a lot of different trends, obviously, this past year, and I'm going to include even more statistics in a blog article that kind of is going to correspond to this specific podcast. But you want to have some major takeaways here. Number one would be nostalgic or sort of nerdy campaigns. So these could be remakes, reprints, iconic franchises. When there's some kind of like a nostalgic element, it tends to do really well with Kickstarter. And that's obviously for the creative category. We're seeing the rise of short form film and video production, of course, hand in hand. Also theater projects as well, as you saw, are really growing a lot on the platform. More industry shakeups when it comes to that. We're also seeing deluxe editions. So people who want not just like a story or something that they're reading and just kind of taking away, high level elements there, they really want to have like collectible items. And I think that the reason that pairs well with Kickstarter as a platform is that we tend to have people that are backing at much higher amounts. Again, average pledge per backer is around 115, and that's grown 5% year over year. So 116, sorry, I misspoke there. I think that's a huge growth, and we're seeing more people that are kind of investing in like luxury items and collectibles. So if you're thinking about doing anything publishing related, think about how can you make something that's more of like a deluxe collectible edition. Another thing, of course, would be tabletops growth and dominance on the platform. And we're seeing other platforms as well that are trying to kind of eat that pie and try to get in on there. But what I would say is that more and more campaigns are launching in the tabletop category and also involving digital rewards. We mentioned kind of the ability as well for video games to have physical rewards. We're also seeing kind of the merging of, with tabletops, digital rewards being offered more and more for those types of projects. Now that's great for Kickstarter's creative report, but what about some of my trends that I am noticing on the Kickstarter platform? Well, first of all, I would say one big trend that I've noticed that I think not enough people are talking about is that the structuring of rewards is really changing. Man, the game is changing when it comes to the way you structure rewards. And I kind of even, hesitate to share this with you because I do think this is a really cool trend. So for example, in the tabletop category, having $1 pledges rather than being a sign of a contribution, instead it unlocking specific add-ons that people can then back at to be able to create unique collections rather than just backing a normal reward tier. You can back the $1 tier and you can grab some really unique add-ons to be able to create your own little package there if you don't see something that you want when it comes to traditional rewards. If you're worried about the fulfillment and shipping part of your Kickstarter campaign when it comes to getting out all those perks and rewards to your backers, rest assured I've put together a complete Kickstarter fulfillment and shipping checklist for you, and it's free. This is sponsored by the folks at Fulfillrite, and they thought that you should have this checklist as part of your arsenal going into a crowdfunding campaign. If you want to get instant access to this checklist and it's free, you can go to fulfillrite.com/checklist. Again, that is fulfillrite.com/checklist, fulfillrite.com/checklist. Just go to that link and you can download it immediately. Another trend that I've been noticing more and more on the platform, and you're going to want to write this one down, specifically if you got a high-end design product or something that you're trying to come out with and there's kind of a lot of question and second guessing around like the design elements, and it's really like, functionality heavy. I tend to see that there's actually this new trend where you can offer expedited shipping. And I think it makes a lot of sense because the number one question you get whenever you're doing like a pre-launch and you're growing your audience, and I talk about this on my free course at crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter. I go through a whole free course about all the tips, advice, tactics, and techniques to launch a successful Kickstarter campaign. You want to learn more about that, go and check out my free course at crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter. But one of the things I talk about is that a lot of backers not only want to have that confidence that they're going to get what they order and they back, but they also want to get it quickly. So the more you can give them confidence around the timetable of your rewards, the better. And one of those trends, like I mentioned, is that more and more campaigns are offering what's called expedited reward shipping, where you can back at maybe like a higher amount. And in exchange for that, or maybe even being the first one to back, you can get expedited shipping. Now, that might make some other backers a little bit angry, but you have to keep in mind that you're creating this product in batches. And chances are you're going to produce the first batch before you get to the next one. And rather than just randomly shipping that out, you can ship that out to the people that backed the campaign first, that believed in it first, or that are paying a higher amount in order to get that expedited shipping. And I think a great example of that was the Roller Pro carry-on luggage by Peak Design. Those guys have already raised over $8 million with their project, and they're really, in my opinion, really relying heavily on that idea of expedited shipping. Another trend that I noticed this past year with Kickstarter, and I think this is actually something that a lot of creators know about, but maybe haven't really thought about it strategically, is this idea of launching a campaign in tandem with an influencer. And I've actually helped 2 different projects launch in this manner, and actually more than that, 3. And when it comes to this, what you want to do is, thinking about your brand, if you had an influencer on board, either within the pre-launch cycle or when you are live, it can be a way to not only build credibility, but also to build that audience before you go live. And we've seen this working very successfully when it comes to projects. So if you've been thinking about launching a campaign, one kind of silver bullet is to launch with an influencer. Now, that influencer could be on your team, or they could just be on board with sharing some of those assets, those media assets that you create leading up to the launch, or even being willing to share for a kickback, like a 10% percentage, right, of the funding that they drive to the campaign. If you do that, that's kind of like a silver bullet right now, because it gives you tremendous credibility. You already have an audience when you go live, and you can build that audience ahead of time, utilizing their audience base in order to create a really profound effect when you go live with your project. Now, another trend that I want to talk about really quickly on this podcast, and I think this is something that also works, not just on Kickstarter, but in e-commerce in general, is this idea of attaching a culture to a product. And what do I mean by that? I mean, for example, Japanese design, or inspired by Swiss engineering, or made with, Italian luxury leather manufactured in this specific region of Italy. The more that you can kind of attach a culture to your product, I do think it kind of is interesting in the way that it kind of brands you uniquely on the platform. And I've been seeing more projects like that are successful. I do think that this is more in the line with like the fashion category, but I would say that if you're doing a fashion product of some kind, this is something you want to pay attention to, is to be aware of your design style, and more specifically, what is the history of that design style? Is it inspired by Paris fashion? Is it, in line with the way that South Korea, is thinking about, beauty products? You want to think about how your product's brand is in line with a specific style. And if that style has a culture that's attached to it, it can do really well, and it can stand out to backers on the Kickstarter platform. Now, the final trend that I want to talk about that I've noticed personally, and before that, after that, we'll get into some just really quick takeaways, would be for anyone who's been thinking about launching a campaign. I think we're seeing a heavy trend towards really data and scientific analysis when it comes to launching a product. And back in the day, this was difficult to do because we didn't have things like AI technology. We didn't have even really good tracking when you were first getting started with digital marketing. There wasn't really very good tracking beyond Google Analytics. And then you started to get more into Facebook marketing, right? And you get more and more data and analysis abilities as you kind of go with digital marketing. And I've been seeing this trend just grow and grow. And now there's even more ability when it comes to that using AI technology. So one trend that I personally noticed is that more creators are kind of looking at doing a pre-launch as more of like a science, and really viewing this as, how can we validate things like pricing upfront? How can we get more exposure to that audience and see the people that are opting in to be able to really be interested in buying this before we go out with it on Kickstarter? How can we even have different angles and identify before we go live with our project the one that resonates most in terms of the targeting, segmentation, and placement of the audience that we're really going after when it comes to this product? So I think that this is a growing trend. I think that more creators are going to have more of a scientific mind, right, going into that launch, rather than more of like the intuitive, artistic mind, which I love. And I do think it's incredibly important to have an intuitive process and a creative process going into a campaign, but it's equally important to also look at the data, to look at the people that are, experiencing your problem most, and to have that kind of scientific mind going into a pre-launch or a live Kickstarter campaign. So I will talk about some more trends that I have noticed and put that into that blog post, this kind of comprehensive article that I'm writing. But if you want to learn more and you want to cut through the fluff, you want to go straight to the source, you can also go down below and you can book an individual one-on-one coaching call with me. That's an intensive coaching call where we go through the A to Z of your project, everything that we need to know in order to set you up for success no matter what category you're launching, and how can you use the best practices of crowdfunding to supercharge your launch, so to get this out there, you get that funding that you need in order to move your project forward, and you build a brand at the same time. If you've ever been wondering about not only the building blocks of crowdfunding, but the implementation, how do you execute upon this vast stores of education and knowledge in order to actually crush it when you go live, you're going to want to go down below and book an individual one-on-one coaching call with me, because not only can we go through that, we can also talk about other options that I have when it comes to long-term guidance, or in some select cases, execution. And you can go to that link down below at crowdcrux.com/coaching and book your individual one-on-one coaching call today. Don't hesitate. Go down below and book your one-on-one coaching call at crowdcrux.com/coaching. All right, let's finish off with some of those tidbits or takeaways. My first takeaway for you is in homework action item is go down below and learn more about my free course, obviously, and some of the free links in the description in terms of my free newsletter. Hop on those and you'll start surrounding yourself with high quality education information as you're going through this process. Number 2, go out there and back a campaign on Kickstarter. Lo and behold, like we'll do calls all the time with a student, and my man, they have not yet backed a campaign on Kickstarter. This is such a great experience because you can see how other creators are doing their marketing, doing their communications, how they're dealing with different problems that crop up as they're fulfilling their products. Go down below and learn more about my free options, but also go and back a campaign on Kickstarter. It could be for $1, it could be for $5, it could be for an average amount, $100, right, or more, and get the actual reward. But you're going to want to go and back a campaign on Kickstarter. Another great, takeaway I would say that I really want you to do, and for anyone who's listening that's kind of not interested in statistics, I still would recommend to go and do this. Go to crowdcrux.com, and on the bottom page in the navigation, there's a section that says stats. I want you to go to the stats section, and I want you to start to look at the different categories that are there on Kickstarter's page. And what that's going to allow you to do is to look at the success rates and as they vary from category to category. So for example, in the design category, there's a 43% success rate. In the games category, there's a 51% success rate. In the music category, a 50%. In the comics, a 62% success rate. What this is going to allow you to do is to put your launch in the context of the different categories on Kickstarter. And this is kind of what I talked about back in the day when I did my mini econ thesis at George Washington University, comparing the different categories on Kickstarter. My thesis was that depending on the category you launch in, the variables that affect success are going to be different. And lo and behold, it turned out to be true, right? And it led to my career as well. So go and learn a little bit about the different categories, because that's actually way more informative as to how well you're going to do. It's not just launching on Kickstarter, it's which category you're launching on. My next takeaway is that if you are the person who is more of like a creative type and you maybe have an idea or a project, try to fit that idea into something that's already working well. I gave that example before of like you're doing artwork, maybe you put that artwork onto tarot cards, right? Think about how you can utilize the existing trends that are going well right now on Kickstarter to your advantage. And just think about, if you already have a product, how can you fit that into a major trend? Maybe think about the design a little bit differently, or think about designing with sustainable materials, or think about where it is you're sourcing the product from, right? How can you actually alter that a little bit to be able to be in the headwinds when it comes to what's working really well when it comes to Kickstarter? So for example, this is like, you're going down the road, right? And you hop into a boat and you're going on the boat and you're going down the river, right? You could go down the river at a great easy pace, and that's wonderful. Or there's like a jet stream of wind and you can go over and you can sail over to that jet stream, and all of a sudden you're like turbocharged, right? When it comes to your journey down that river. So if you're in a major trend, it's kind of like you have the wind at your back, you're in that jet stream, and you are soaring towards where you need to go at a much more accelerated pace. So see and identify how could you maybe play into one of these major trends. And my final tip for you, and we'll close off the episode with this, is to take some action. other people who are not as intelligent as you, that don't even have as much financial resources as you, that maybe don't even have as good of an idea or a product as you are being successful with crowdfunding. So why not you? Get up off your butt and take some action. Or if you've already been taking some action, you've just been holding off, sitting on your hands, kind of nervous about this, really just begin to make steps forward, continue to progress, continue to put one foot in front of the other. I know it's challenging. Life happens. We all have very busy lives. There's family, there's careers, there's all these other things that are happening. Just make a commitment that, you know what, this year, this is the year that I'm going to get this sucker launched. And if you feel that way, leave a positive rating and review on this podcast. Come back on the show as one of my guests, and I would love to interview you if you are successful with your campaign. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Salvador Brigman, and I will see you next time.